My first objective, I think, is not to get scolded by Karim Raslan on national TV. I fear that, and I think that about encapsulates the state of things that we are in now. Rightly or wrongly, So further to that, of course, the objective is to elevate the performance of EC to a standard that is universally accepted, probably international standard. In saying so, I'm not saying that the EC is no good now. I'm not saying that the staff and the workforce are no good. They are good. I think they have been doing a great job operationally. They have been organizing and regulating elections many times. I think without major incident, all of them they did it successfully. So that's a strength. Operationally, I think the EC is strong. The workforce is efficient, committed, and I think I inherit a good workforce with a proven track record. But of course, at the policy level, as we all know and as publicly perceived, there are areas in which improvements and even reforms are needed. So those things I'm looking I'm looking forward to addressing those. I think the first thing is to clean up the electoral roll, and I would love to have automatic registration of voters. And of course, the biggest challenge is to look at the redelineation process that was so-called updated last year or earlier this year, passed by Parliament prior to GE14.
The process or the delimitation itself?
Both, because the processes affect the result. The procedures and the basis and premise upon which the redelineation is done is set out in the Constitution. But I suppose they were given different interpretations, and so I have to find a way at looking at those things. Of concern is the provision in the Constitution that says that redelineation can only be revisited once in 8 years. So are we going to be stuck with that for the next 8 years, or can anything be done about that exercise? So that needs an in-depth thinking, in-depth study and analysis on what is wrong with that process, what is wrong with the result of that process, and what to be done to address it. And then of course, I'm also looking for stricter enforcement of the Election Offences Act. I think policy-wise, Election Offences Act have not really been enforced at all. So we see the offences of treating, the offences of bribing, that took place all these years, not only in GE14, all these years. As a law practitioner, we have gone to court in election petition to complain about all these things, but the court has imposed a very high burden on petitioners. You not only have to prove the offences, but you have to prove how those offences, if committed, have affected the result. So those kind of things I would like to take a relook and see what kind of enforcement we could carry on, whether we have the power to investigate, or investigation must be done by other investigative authorities. So we have to relook on that. That's number 3. And then apart from that, of course, the Election Commission Reform Committee, which has been established, headed by the former
Tan Sri Rashid.
Chairman of SPR, Tan Sri Rashid, they have also announced some reforms. Part of the announcement, which I only read in the media, is to bring the political parties out of registrar societies and come under the EC. Of course, this is done in the UK. Yeah, in the UK, political parties come under the EC. It is a good idea. It is a good idea. Most particularly because if it is under the EC, then the what do you call it? The funds that fund the political parties could be scrutinized by the EC, where it comes from, how they are used, and I think that would make the electoral processes more transparent, especially the funding part. As we see now, we all know that a certain party former leader has been, his house has been raided and they found stash of cash, and the party is now saying that it belongs to the party for the GE. We take that on the face of it, and of course, if political parties come under the EC, then all these things can be done by the EC. But of course, on the difference on the other side of the coin is whether the EC is equipped to play that role, because it will need manpower, it will need expertise. So we have to look at that side as well, the operational side. Corollary to this issue is the next issue, i.e. Election expenses by parties. I think it is a mockery. It is a mockery under the present law. I think for parliamentary is 200,000. I think for ADUN is 100,000 each candidate. And at the end of each election, within a certain period of time, the candidate, whether they win or they lose, they have to file an account.
30 days.
30 days. They have to file an account. And if they did not file an account, they are barred from contesting in the next general election or in any by-election after that election. So I have not come across in my practice as an advisor on election law. I have not come across a single time where the EC has scrutinized the account that have been filed with them, whether they have been called to explain whether this is true or not. You say you spent 200,000, but what about that? What about this? I have not come across. They might have done it. I don't know. It's not publicized. I do not know. But publicly, I have not come across that being done. And on that, I need to also see what are the EC's power in respect of that. Whether we can actually call them and cross-examine them on the account. And if we find the account is not true, what are the powers of the EC? Can we report them to the police or the MAC or what? On the onset of election, RTM or TV3 or whatever will come up with whatever. So we have to have a clear demarcation as to whether that is campaigning or whether that is a normal government operation,
cost of action,
which can be borne by the government. So this is the problem that we have now. So you see, election year, especially, we will see all sort of blitzkrieg,
Yeah.
So we do not have a clear guideline as to whether those things constitute campaigning. And if it does, if it did, then of course the expenses must be reflected. Okay, and of course there is also an argument.
Like in the
Now,
States, yeah.
there's also an argument now by whoever, okay, that, they say that the expenses mentioned in the regulation, the 200,000 and 100,000 for MP and other respectively, is only applicable to candidate. It doesn't apply to party.
Yeah.
So they say, party can spend
As much as it wants.
as much as it wants. So that is why I say it's a mockery. Mockery. But I read that section. No, it doesn't say so. It says every candidate can only spend through his agent. Yeah. So if the party spend on his behalf, then the party becomes his agent.
Yeah.
And if somebody else, like the party, spend for him with his consent or connivance, then it must be deemed that he spends it. Yeah. So I mean, those are the arguments. As a lawyer, I will come up with that kind of argument. But yeah, we need to clarify that.
Yeah. What are your top 3 priorities now? So that's and do you have a timeline? Like, it has to be done in 2 years, 3 years?
Well, I can't say about timeline until I sit down with the workforce, until I engage with the stakeholders. But of course, the ongoing one, I think, is the electoral roll, cleaning up the electoral roll. Yeah, I think that's top. Because by-elections are coming, Sarawak election is coming, so that needs to be addressed as soon as possible.
That's the first priority.
Yeah, the first priority. And then of course the urgent one is the election petitions.
Then followed by election petitions.
Yeah. And then of course the expenses account that I mentioned just now. I really need to look into those because I want to put a stop to election offences. Really, that has to be put to a stop because it must be democratic process. Of course, the redelineation, whatever, will take a longer time because we need to study all sorts of provision, particularly that provision that I mentioned to you just now. We can only revisit once in 8 years. So how?
I mean, one of the strongest arguments, one of the criticisms about the what we have today is that we have malapportionment. Strangely, oddly shaped constituencies and all that. So
under representation.
Yeah. So is that what are those things going to be your concerns?
Of course.
Going into this.
Okay, there are 2 things which concern me with regard to the redelineation. One is, as you say, is malapportionment. We have a certain constituency with 25,000 of voters with 1 parliamentary representative, and on the other hand, we have Tony Pua with 170,000 voters having hit only 1 representative. So if it is 25,000, his constituents should have what? Another 5 representatives. So that's malapportionment. But what going deeper to that is the racial profiling of voters in accordance with racial profiling of voters that defines constituency. Okay, so we have like Selayang, which geographically everybody knows is a Chinese majority area, but there are Malay voters, tens of thousands of them being imported into Selayang. Just, I do not know for whatever purpose. I mean, everybody can say what purpose, but I'm not going to say it. So they bring it there, as a result of which the Selayang constituency has to be redrawn to facilitate this exercise. So that is more difficult to solve. So those 2 areas, and of course, apart from that, the racial profiling, we also have, I think, the profiling in accordance with religion, or religious belief, or religious practice, even, you know. So, to me, it does not reflect the true constituency profile. It does not reflect that, and it can even be arguably divisive, you know. So, and that has a deeper effect to our society. Very deep effect, because after a number of years, then it affects the psyche of the people. Oh, this is a Malay area. This is a Malay conservative area. What are you doing here, Chinese? You know, and this is a liberal area. Yeah. So, so the effect is just not the voting pattern or the result of the voting. The impact is even deeper than that. It affects our society as a whole, our way of life, our mentality. And when the government is elected, government makes policies, and in making that policies, they take all these things into consideration, you see. So policies are affected. And I don't think that is a good thing. I don't think so.
Bersih has called for something like an RCI of the Election Commission after G40, and it's also called for EC's other commissioners to to resign as well. You know, so now then the question is, as China, you will. I know the other commissioners is not your it's not your power to to what. So okay, let's stick to the RCI then. What do you call it? Would you be supportive of such? Is there a need for us to revisit that? And do we want to go backwards to look at it? Or is it important before we can move forward?
You mentioned that. You have mentioned that, whether we want to look backward. Of course, I would like to look at the future, because I've been talking to you just now about what I plan to do, for the future. But of course, like you say, we also need to look at history to learn from our mistake, to learn what not to be done or what got to be done. Yeah. So on the RCI, of course, it is it's not for me to say. I cannot say, hey, come, let's investigate my own agency. So I think that is a decision which the government has to make. The government of the day has to make. And of course, if a decision is taken, the EC would render all the cooperation that is necessary. That is all that I can say. But it is not for me to say, hey, let's investigate my predecessors. I think it's rather, I would say, inappropriate, I would say. On the commissioners, of course, I have read very strong calls by various by the civil societies that they ought to resign. Frankly, I have not met any single one of them. I would like to meet and sit down with them and impress upon them my plans. And I would like to tell them categorically that these are my plans, and I need your support. If you are not open to this plan or not supporting me on this plan, then we can't work together. And of course, if the government would like to replace them, they will have to.
Is their prerogative
to resign? I do have what do call it, plan to really sit down and talk to them and see what their outlook is, for the future. And I will have to make a judgment on their willingness and preparedness for this new Malaysia move